coming up.
So we know that the Act itself requires two thresholds to be met. You're aware of those thresholds. What evidence did the department rely upon?
If I could, though, with specificity, we're in Ontario. The nation's capital is being occupied. You know, Doug Ford moves an emergency act and then ostensibly does nothing for weeks. So what powers did they claim under that act that failed?
What are the financial products that couldn't be frozen? Because when I look at the order on financial products, I'm trying to find a financial product that wouldn't be targeted by this seizure.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
So we know that the Act itself requires two thresholds to be met. You're aware of those thresholds. We have to establish that there is a threat to the security of Canada, and that is defined largely from the CSIS Act. You're familiar with that, Mr. Daigle, I take it?
I am.
Can you tell me what evidence the Department of Justice relied upon to establish relevant and credible evidence that meets the definition as set out through A to D? Espionage, foreign influenced activities, serious violence to achieve a political, religious, ideological objective, and to overthrow a constitutionally established system of government in Canada. What evidence did the department rely upon?
So I guess in answer to that question, I would point out that we don't have to meet A, B, C, and D in order to invoke the Emergencies Act. We only need to meet one of those. And the one that the government seized on was 2C, which talks about threats of violence to people and goods. And the Section 58 report that I've referred to and that's been shared, it's been tabled in Parliament and shared with this committee, lays out the facts and the reasons that set out the threats of violence that the government identified to and relied on to invoke the Act.
Threats of violence. The Act is threats of a serious violent act against persons or property for the purpose of, not independent, for the purpose of achieving a political, religious, or ideological objective within Canada. So I agree with you that there was some evidence of some violent acts. There were threats of harassment. There were threats of assault, if not actual perceived threats of assault. How does that then go into the further definition of achieving a political, religious, or ideological objective within Canada?
So again, I'd refer you to that report, which sets out the reasons that the government had to invoke the Act.
Spell it out right now, sir.
I can refer you to the threats of violence when police try to apply the laws and bring order. We have reports of those. There's reports of...
Okay, let me stop you right there.
Thank you. Unfortunately...
Is that it?
Unfortunately...
Oh, my God.
Okay. The document on the charter that you provided that we received today, it was prepared after the minister appeared? Yes, exactly. I want to understand correctly your definition of seizing. Your position seems to be that it's not seizing under the charter because it's the bank blocking accounts. Is that correct? Well, first, there was no seizure because there was no property transferred. Nobody took someone's account and gave it to someone else. You know the Laroche decision. You're a lawyer. You're the very senior official at Mr. Carignan.
Je m'excuse, but...
I'm sorry.
I know you're on a roll, sir. I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Senator Harder, the floor is yours. Perhaps what I haven't gotten enough information about is the effectiveness or the ineffectiveness of the municipal and provincial declarations of emergency. So in your assessment, in your deliberations in invoking the Emergency Act, was it determined that the emergencies orders issued by the City of Ottawa and the province of Ontario had been ineffective.
They were in effect, yes.
And so, in terms of what was made available, particularly, I feel like the province kind of got let off the hook on this one. And when you were doing your assessments, what areas did the Provincial Emergency Act, because it's something that I haven't fully contemplated, where did they fall short, and what was the difference there?
Well, I think what we looked at when we looked at the Ontario emergency and the city's emergency and the injunctions, I mean, we just didn't look at what Ontario was doing. We were looking at what was happening across the country. In every province, some other provinces took measures under the Emergencies Act. In New Brunswick, for example, they took some measures under their Emergencies
If I
Act.
could, though, with specificity, we're in Ontario, the nation's capital is being occupied. Doug Ford moves an Emergency Act and then ostensibly does nothing for weeks. So what powers did they claim under that act that failed, and why didn't the municipality of Ottawa consider, as our committee colleague, Mr. White had suggested to, using the aid to civil power avenue through which they could have, provided the powers that would have been able to tow away the trucks and everything else?
So I'd have to go back and look at the Ontario order, but I think it mostly increased significantly some fines. I think they were having, from what I saw, difficulty applying fines in Ontario, and it didn't seem to get people out of there.
How does one have difficulty applying fines?
They weren't making a difference. People were not leaving.
Were they writing the fines?
I think I don't know what I don't have a list of what the Ontario government did or the Ottawa Police Services did, but I know that a lot of charges have been and have been laid and are still before the courts.
Did your department consider the aid to civil power as a possible outcome that would not require the Emergency Act?
That would not be something that the Department of Justice would be considering. It would be something that another minister of the Crown would be considering.
And I look forward to having them before us so I could put that question to them. Thank you
Saisi.
very much.
OK. Si je...
Seize. My series of questions on seizure. You've said since property wasn't seized, money stayed in the bank account, frozen, so it's not a seizure. That's what you've said. That's what I said, yes. You know that if lawyers say that at the Supreme Court, that wouldn't go so well. If we were before the Supreme Court, well, it will go to the Supreme Court. And you said the other point to say it's not a seizure is that it's not us, it's the bank that froze it. Yes, that's correct. It's the bank that froze the account. Froze the account, not seized. And when the bank freezes the account or seizes the account, don't you think it's acting on behalf of the state? The order creates an obligation for the bank, and the bank makes its decision. It has discretion to act or not act based on information it has. So once again, that'll be difficult before the Supreme Court, I'd say. What are the financial products that couldn't be frozen? Because when I look at the order on financial products, I'm trying to find a financial product that wouldn't be targeted by this seizure. Because you said it wasn't excessive, it was proportional, it was reasonable, and I'm trying to find what wouldn't be seized, and I couldn't find it.
I could give you an example in the order, which is that with respect to insurance policies, the order says that they are not to be frozen except for insurance policies that apply to motor vehicles that are participating or being used in the illegal protests or blockades.
En avez-vous d'autres?
Do you have others?
Otherwise, there is a list of financial services, and I don't have any other exceptions, but
Qui
that
était...
was one I
OK.
wanted to
Donc,
provide
tous
you.
les autres étaient...
So all of the others were covered by seizure.
This is provided by the list of entities that are in Section 3 of the order.
OK. Et en quoi c'était raisonnable de...
How is it reasonable to seize just about anything of a person's finances?
Seizing, it's freezing or gelé, and it is only applicable to designated persons as they're defined in the order, which is persons who are participating in the illegal activities. So the financial institutions had an ongoing obligation to review the situation, and if they found somebody was no longer participating, to
Thank you.
stop the
Thank you.
freezing.
Unfortunately,
Procureur
Mr.
général
Senator
du Québec
Carignan.
contre La Roche.
The case of La Roche,
Oui, vous le connaissez?
are you familiar with it? Inaudible.
2 fois, je pose la question.
I've asked the question twice. I'd like to have the answer.
La question au début.
You should ask the question at the beginning.
C'est passé du droit,
She's
je
not
présume
wrong.
qu'il le connaît.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.